The next day, everyone involved in the incident was tied up in a line. Their heads were covered with cloth, and they were escorted away. "Walk slowly, don't rush, keep the pace," a voice commanded. Behind the cloth covering their heads, Kim and Yoon grew uneasy. "Where are they taking me? Does the state counselor know about my situation?" Suddenly, a voice called out, "New official from the Ministry of Taxation." "Sit here." Kim's heart pounded wildly. "Did I hear that right? Sit." Images of torture flashed through his mind. "A chair! Am I about to be interrogated and tortured?" Fear consumed him. With a trembling voice, he shouted, "I confess! I can't live crippled for the rest of my life. I'll admit everything. I colluded with the merchants. I was supposed to provide 3 sacks of rice and 1 roll of cotton cloth to every group participating in the initiation ceremony. I'll accept any punishment. Just please let me go unharmed." When the cloth was finally removed, cold sweat drenched Kim. His breath came in short gasps as he realized he was sitting inside the Ministry of Taxation. Everyone stared at him in shock. Hyang, who seemed surprised, grinned. "Well now, that was an unexpected confession." The Minister of Taxation's face flushed red with fury. Pointing at Kim, he roared, "You bastard! I overlooked your arrogance because you're a distant relative of the state counselor, and this is how you repay me?" Watching the heated exchange, Hyang quietly slipped aside and muttered under his breath, "Hit him harder, Minister. Don't let up." A few days later, at Gyeongbok Palace, His Majesty stood in place enjoying his meal. With a calm tone, he said, "I know you've all worked hard, so I've prepared something to lift your spirits." The ministers glanced at each other with suspicious looks, wondering what he meant. Just days ago, they had been scolded harshly. Meanwhile, someone sitting beside him beamed with a wide smile. "Thank you so much, Your Majesty." With a stern face, the king lifted his bowl and glanced at the Minister of Taxation below. Inwardly, he thought, "Minister of Taxation, could you at least control your expression? Can't you read the room?" Realizing quickly, the Minister of Taxation bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I don't know how to repay your generosity, which rivals the vastness of heaven." The king smiled and said, "For the people to live in peace and prosperity, the court must first provide strong support. So, I hope you can set aside the stress of your work and enjoy this meal." The officials bowed their heads and expressed their gratitude. The next day, the Minister of Taxation was stunned by the king's new order. The mountain of assigned tasks left him in shock. "I knew something like this was coming. I feel like retiring already." Elsewhere in the palace, the king and crown prince were strolling, when suddenly a eunuch came running in a panic. "Your Majesty, they've entered the city." Calmly, the king replied, "All right, I know. Relax." The king and crown prince exchanged sly smiles. "They must be here already." As he hurried off, Hyang turned back to the king and said, "I'll go ahead to meet the delegation and the interpreters." "Very well, see you later," replied King Sejong. Inside the main hall of the palace, the king gazed at the officials before him. His voice was warm, yet firm. "The long journey must have been exhausting. I truly apologize for summoning you here right after your return. But this matter is far too important. I couldn't delay it any longer." The envoy immediately bowed. "It's no trouble at all, Your Majesty. As your servant, this is my duty." King Sejong gave a faint smile before continuing. "So, what do you think of the new emperor?" The envoy thought for a moment before answering. "He seems to be a man of gentle character. His voice is calm and steady, and his every gesture radiates elegance and dignity." The king nodded. "And how is he regarded by the officials of his court?" The envoy replied, "Most of them hold him in high esteem, Your Majesty. While the late emperor was occupied with conquests, he managed state affairs with remarkable skill. After ascending the throne, he quickly concluded the remaining campaigns left behind by his predecessor. Beyond that, he has declared that there will be no further major conquests, unless there is an absolutely just cause." The king let out a sigh of relief. Covering one eye, he said, "That is good news. Now, where are the royal physician and the physiognomist who accompanied you? Bring them in." The royal physician and physiognomist entered at once and knelt respectfully. Physician Lee Hansu greeted him, "Your Majesty the King." The physiognomist also bowed deeply in respect, but the king waved his hand, motioning them closer. "Yes, Your Majesty," they answered in unison. The king fixed his sharp gaze on them. "What are your thoughts on the new emperor?" Lee Hansu hesitated briefly before speaking. First, he had a very imposing presence. His flesh looked as though it could spill over at any moment, making even sitting on the throne appear like a struggle. His eyes were pale and bloodshot, most likely from the fatigue of mourning. His complexion was uneven and pale. From a physiognomic perspective, his relationship with his siblings may not be harmonious. However, his lineage itself appears promising. Hansu paused, then spoke more softly. "But his line of destiny does not extend past the corner of his lips. This could be a sign that his life will not be long." The hall fell into silence. The king's eyes narrowed. "You have done well. You may leave." Hansu bowed deeply. "Your Majesty's kindness is immeasurable." As the physician and physiognomist withdrew, the king turned to the envoy, his eyes narrowing in calculation. "So, You also believe the new emperor's health is failing? The Minister of Rights responded, Yes, Your Majesty. I, too, noticed his health appeared highly unstable. His excessive weight clearly hinders his breathing. Hearing this, the king fell silent, recalling Hyang's earlier words. His gaze darkened as his thoughts turned. If the emperor were to fall ill or die too soon, the political balance would collapse. If not for Hyang, I might have ended up the same way. Letting out a long sigh, he finally spoke in a calmer tone. If this delegation's observations are correct, the reign of the new emperor may not last long. But his mind quickly shifted to a more pressing concern. If the emperor changes, what will become of Joseon's trade post in Shandong? The envoy's expression grew more cautious as he replied, Your Majesty, much of this journey was spent in discussion over that very matter. The merchants of Joseon and the Ming dynasty have built a very active trade relationship, and the taxes paid to the Ming court have increased. King Sejong leaned forward with interest at this report. I already know of this. Our treasury has grown significantly as well. So then, what are their plans going forward? The envoy answered firmly, Your Majesty, the new emperor has declared that the trade posts in Shandong will be maintained due to their great value. However, with the rise of pirates in those waters, Ming troops will be stationed around the posts to address the threat. The officials present began whispering among themselves. This is good news. With the Ming soldiers protecting us, there's nothing to worry about. Truly, a blessing from the heavens. But amid their excitement, none of them noticed the king's expression begin to change. As the chatter went on, the left state councillor spoke eagerly. All of this is thanks to the generosity of the Ming emperor. Another official added, Then surely things will only become more secure, right? This is truly a blessing from the great empire. The moment those words were spoken, the atmosphere shifted. The smiles on their faces faded away. One by one, their expressions darkened as though they had just realized something dreadful. The king's displeasure was clear. He fixed his sharp gaze on the officials before finally speaking. Sometimes I wonder, are we truly worthy of leading the people? In an instant, their faces went pale. We beg your forgiveness, Your Majesty, they stammered, their voices trembling with fear. But the king's anger only swelled. He stomped his foot against the floor. If you regret it, then stop doing things that you'll come to regret. Left State Councillor, do you realize your mistake? The left councillor trembled violently. His reply was barely audible. Forgive me, Your Majesty. But suddenly, something inside him snapped. You think I would just say that? Why is it always me? Why is it always me who has to bear the blame for everything? His face flushed red with suppressed rage, his breathing ragged. My son is the same age as you. I've had enough. I can't take this anymore. His chest heaved, his fists clenched as if ready to explode. I can't take it. I'm done. I quit. But then, he froze. A voice echoed in his mind. In his thoughts, he saw the image of his wife embracing their daughter. You must endure. Think of our children, especially our daughter, who married into the CO family. She still has no child and lives in constant worry. Hold on, for her sake. The fury in his eyes dimmed. What moments ago was boiling rage turned into deep exhaustion. He let out a long breath. In his heart, he whispered, I want nothing more than to resign. But instead of voicing his thoughts, he simply bowed his head and muttered softly, I am guilty, Your Majesty. The king let out a heavy sigh. He no longer wished to hear more. With one motion, he turned and began to walk away. That's enough for today. You may all leave. Without looking back, he exited the chamber. The officials sat frozen in silence, exchanging confused glances. What just happened? One whispered. I don't know either, another replied. The left councillor clutched his chest as the others turned to him with questioning eyes. Suddenly he exploded. You think I know? Go home already and stop bothering me. With heavy steps, he walked out. Under the bright sky, he cursed. Why must the sky be so clear today of all days? Elsewhere, at the back gate of the Joseon Research Institute, a guard called out, Minister of Taxation, what brings you here? Is the Minister of Public Works inside? The tax minister replied. When he entered, the Minister of Public Works turned his head in surprise. My lord, I never expected you to come here. The tax minister gave a brief nod. I came to seek your opinion. Please, have a seat, the Public Works minister said, motioning him over. Thank you. As soon as he sat, the tax minister let out a long sigh. You must have already heard. Just an hour ago, the Ming condolence delegation returned. He leaned forward, his voice weakening. Then, detail by detail, he recounted everyone's reactions, even mimicking their expressions. Falling silent for a moment, he finally spoke bitterly. And then, His Majesty grew furious. He walked out just like that. The room grew heavier than before. At last, with a weary voice, he muttered, With things like this, how can I go on living? What exactly was our mistake? He exhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Lately, all I've wanted to do is hand in my resignation and return home, to live a simple life again. The Public Works Minister stroked his chin, lost in thought. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. He drew in a deep breath, then suddenly stood tall and resolute. If it's come to this, then come with me. The tax minister was taken aback. Where are we going? The public works minister gave him only a brief glance. You'll find out when we get there. At the Eastern Palace, just as Hyang was about to step out to meet an official, he overheard a conversation near the door. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. That man? The Minister of Taxation? What's he doing at the Research Institute? And isn't the Minister of Public Works with him too? Not wanting to dwell on it, Hyang chose to ask directly. Isn't that the Minister of Public Works? What brings you here? The Minister of Taxation looked tense, beads of sweat forming at his temple. We came to seek your highness the Crown Prince's opinion. Hyang gave a faint smirk. Opinion, is it? Very well. Come inside. He let out a quiet sigh before continuing. As I expected, its only natural father was furious. Then he fixed his gaze on the Minister of Taxation. You're the one responsible for the nation's finances, aren't you? Yes, your highness, the minister replied. Hyang's expression grew cold with disappointment. And yet, you don't even understand the problem? The tax minister lowered his head, bewildered. My apologies, your highness, but could you explain what's really happening? Hyang answered calmly. It's simple. If we build an embassy near the Ming Navy's base, problems will arise. The tax minister lifted his head, stunned. Why? Wouldn't that make it safer? Hyang shook his head. Do you think Ming's finances are overflowing? Leaning back, he stared straight ahead. Even though Japanese pirates have decreased, the threat still remains. Stationing their navy there will cost a fortune. And do you know where that money will come from? The minister thought for a moment. From tax revenue? Exactly. Hyang nodded. Sooner or later, they'll raise taxes. But the question is, will those taxes truly go to the navy, or be diverted elsewhere? The Minister of Taxation's face turned pale. His hands fidgeted, fingers brushing against his beard. If that's the case, Joseon's finances will be affected as well. He shook his head, eyes filled with disbelief. I never imagined the situation could develop this far. Hyang's eyes sharpened. That's why we must send someone to gather more information. There's no reason to oppose the construction of the Ming naval base. Instead, we need to assess how large it will be and estimate the Navy's yearly expenses. That way, we can prepare in advance. The tax minister nodded with understanding. There's no time to waste. We must act quickly. Then stop with the formalities and get it done, Hyang pressed. Yes, your highness. As the tax minister departed, Hyang turned to Lord Jung. Do you think the tax minister and the other high officials will challenge my opinion? Lord Jung answered softly. Yes, most likely. Hyang let out a sigh. Debates aren't about winning. They're about finding the best decision. Young Cho gave a faint smile, inwardly admitting the truth in the Crown Prince's words. Joseon had advanced greatly thanks to his experiments. He couldn't help but think, I truly want to see the Joseon this boy will create. But before he could express his thoughts further, his mind drifted to his wife and children. How long has it been since I last saw them? Oh, Lord Jung, Hyang suddenly said. Since you're here, would you like to see some items brought from Ming? My apologies. What kind of items, your highness? Jung Cho's eyes welled with tears, nearly crying at the thought of having to cancel his plans to finally return home. Elsewhere, hurried footsteps sounded from outside. Is anyone here? The Minister of Taxation opened the door, but the room was empty. No one's here. Suddenly, the left state councillor's voice rang out. So, you don't consider me human anymore, just because His Majesty dislikes me? The tax minister flinched in surprise. Oh, left councillor, it's not that. I thought you had already gone home. The left councillor gave a faint smile. Even if I did, I'd only end up drinking wine. The tax minister approached and sat beside him. Good timing. I've found a solution to that problem. But before he could continue, someone else entered the room. Minister of Taxation, left state councillor, why are you still here? Haven't you gone home? With a sigh, the tax minister called out, Chief State Councillor, perfect timing. There's something we need to discuss. The chief councillor looked at them curiously. A solution? What do you mean by that? Why all of a sudden? At that moment, the right state councillor also entered. So, everyone's here, I see. The tax minister stood and gestured for them all to sit. Let's begin our discussion. Drawing a deep breath, he declared, I know why His Majesty was so angry. But before he could finish, yet another person walked in. Yi Cheon. Why are you all still here and not at home? I thought I heard a horse neighing. At last, everyone gathered there that evening. The left state councillor spoke seriously. Let's hear it now. What do you mean by a solution to this problem? The Minister of Taxation fell silent for a moment, glancing at the door to make sure no one else was coming in, then continued. His Majesty was so furious that he left ahead of us. Do you know why? Everyone pretended to be surprised. Ah, so that's the reason. No wonder His Majesty was so angry. The Minister of Taxation stood there, confused. Wait, I haven't said anything yet. You're dragging this out too long. Just tell us already, someone muttered in irritation. As the night wore on, the room was still filled with heated discussion. So, we really didn't consider the financial cost properly? One of them murmured. The left state councillor nodded. Now I understand why the king was so upset. He tapped his finger firmly on the table. We must never let this happen again. If there's anything to be conveyed to His Majesty, leave it to me. I'll deliver it personally. His gaze drifted off, lost in thought. These were the sharp insights of the young Crown Prince. Meanwhile, at the king's residence, a eunuch reported, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince has arrived. Send him in." As soon as Hyang entered, the king asked, "Did you bring the documents I requested?" Hyang raised several scrolls in his hands. "Yes, father. I also brought a few other books." "Let me see them," the king replied. He began reading carefully, his eyes scanning each word. Sitting across from him, Hyang remained silent, simply watching his father absorbed in the texts. Then, he felt something. An overwhelming aura radiated from the king, filling the room with a heavy presence. Hyang tilted his head. Whenever his father focused on something, it felt as if he absorbed all the energy around him. Hyang smiled faintly to himself. "So, this is what they call complete concentration?" Time passed. 4 hours later, the king finally looked up, startled by what he saw. Hyang, who had been sitting upright, was now fast asleep, face down on the floor. The king chuckled softly and shook his head. "Good grief." He walked over and easily lifted his son. "This boy has grown heavier. Hurry and grow up." Then, correcting himself, he muttered, "No, don't grow up too quickly. Grow slowly so I can watch over you a little longer." The next morning, outside the palace, 2 men staggered as they walked. Their bodies trembled with exhaustion. Both Kim and Yoon looked utterly worn out. Kim let out a long sigh. "Finally, all the documents are done. What a dreadful 3 months." They exchanged weary glances, but smiled with relief. Just then, the sound of galloping hooves drew near. A soldier rushed up, shouting loudly, "Emergency report!" At King Sejong's residence, the king clutched a letter tightly, reading its contents with deep concentration. His expression hardened. "Chief Eunuch, summon the Chief Royal Secretary." "Yes, Your Majesty," the eunuch replied. But before he could leave, the king changed his order. "No. Deliver my command at once. Call all high officials to meet me immediately." At the testing grounds, Hyang stood before a table full of firearms, discussing with military officers. "All officers from the northern provinces believe this new rifle is more practical than the old model," one officer reported. Another countered, "In the north, we still have to solve the problem of airflow. And not only that," added another, "the reloading time must also be taken into account." In the midst of their debate, a guard rushed in. "Your Highness, forgive the interruption. A royal decree has arrived, ordering all third-rank ministers and above to enter the palace immediately." Hyang was startled. "Right now? What's going on?" After a brief pause, he said, "Very well, I understand. We must leave at once." As they headed toward their horses, one of the officials said, "We've already made preparations. Allow me to guide you." Without delay, they sped toward the palace at full gallop. Along the way, Hyang pondered his father's emergency decree. What in the world has happened? Upon arrival, Hyang went straight to the main hall. "Eunuch Park, what's going on?" The eunuch shook his head, still confused. "I don't know the details myself, only that it's an urgent report from the north." A chill ran down Hyang's spine. "An emergency report from the north?" Yi Cheon spoke up. "If it comes from the north, it must be no trivial matter." Hyang's eyes narrowed in thought. "Where is this scent of blood coming from?" A eunuch approached him. "Your Highness, I have prepared your official robes. Please change into them." "I understand," Hyang replied. Yi Cheon bowed. "Your Highness, we will also change into our formal uniforms and head to His Majesty's hall." As they walked away, Hyang watched their retreating backs. For a moment, he sensed something. What made me shiver earlier was their killing intent. Just the thought of war throws them straight into battle mode. I must never forget, Joseon was built upon their blood as its foundation. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.